Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Inventory 2024 Remake series. In this episode, as well as the next, if we don't get it finished in this episode, we're going to be working on the armor system for the inventory. Because up to this point, we have a fully functioning inventory system. You can equip items, you can unequip them, you can drop them, you can hold them, you can pick them up and everything, right? So everything works perfectly fine. But I'm also going to be adding an armor system to this series, just to show you the basics of how you would do such a thing. Before we get into that, however, there is one small bug that I would like to fix real quick. So in our server service server inventory server, we have this dropped items prompt, and that's the proximity prompt that's used to pick up items. When you walk up to them, it shows like, pick up the item, it shows the item name. One thing we will probably want to change is we want to turn off this requires line of sight property. And what this does is essentially, if I leave this on, and I have like a part in front of my tools and anchor it. It's relatively self-explanatory, but essentially I need to like actually be able to see the part in order to have the proximity prompt show up. So you could leave that on if you wanted to, but one potential issue that comes up is if you have a tool with multiple parts, and maybe there's the handle part where there's also other parts that sort of go over the handle part, that might kind of mess with the proximity prompt and make so it doesn't work for that particular tool. So I think it's best to just turn this off, and so that's what I'm going to do here. But getting into the armor system, before we get into the code, we're going to set up essentially a structure for how you're going to create armor and design armor. And you could use regular Roblox parts and whatnot, or you could use Blender to create meshes. Either way would work for this particular method that I'll show you. And so we're going to go into Avatar. We're going to go to Rig Builder, and we're just going to generate, I'm going to do R15 because that's what I'm working with, but you could do R6 as well. You will need to change a couple things for R6, but it should be fully functional. I'm going to do a block avatar, just to get like the default sizing and everything. And another thing I will mention is that this will be a relatively simple armor system, so it's not going to scale the parts to match the body parts. It's not going to like scale them, like if you have an avatar that's set to be really tall or something, it's not going to scale the armor to be taller or anything. It's just going to use a fixed model, right? So we are going to have to change some avatar settings to specify the size of players' avatars. But anyway, so if we create our model here, I'm going to call it armor dummy. And then inside of this, we're going to create a model. And this model will essentially be the armor model. So let's see, what armors do we have? I don't think we have any yet. So I'm going to delete these. I'm going to clear out my inventory in the game because I don't need all these quote-unquote rocks. Okay, so now I don't have any items. I'm going to go over to the replicated storage. No, not replicated storage. I'm going to go to server storage, all items. I'm going to take this chest plate. We're going to use this, and with this we're going to generate an actual chest plate. But, well, actually not with that yet. We'll do that later. But we're going to create a chest plate model. There's just going to be a basic chest plate. You could do multiple different armor models. So you might have like an iron chest plate. You might have like a wooden chest plate. Whatever you have for your particular game. And you could also have different things. So we're going to have a helmet. We're going to have the torso armor, and then we're going to have like leg armor. But for now, I'm just going to do. So we have this model. I'm going to call it chest plate. So you want to make sure the model name matches the tool that you're modeling for. And then the next thing you want to do. So the structure we're going to use here is we're going to have parts inside this to actually represent the model, the armor model itself, right? But we're going to have to create models inside this model, and we're going to name those models based on what parts the armor should go around. Because essentially, you have all these different body parts. If you have the same mesh that kind of goes over the whole arm, like the upper arm and the lower arm, then it's not going to bend when the arm bends during animations, and it's not really going to look right? With R6, that wouldn't be as much of a problem, so R6 does make this a little bit easier, but you can use the same structure, where essentially what we're going to do, we're going to name this, so if we're working on, if we want to create the piece of the armor that goes in the upper torso, we're going to create a model, and we're going to call it upper torso. And we're going to make sure it's named exactly the same as the body part we're looking at. And then we can create a part inside of this. And you can also create meshes and whatnot. But essentially you can put any number of parts and design it however you want, and just put it around the dummy and everything. So I've created a basic part. I'm going to make this, maybe I'll make it leather. And notice I'm only overlapping the upper torso. I'm not overlapping any like the lower torso or anything, because I want it to be able to bend with the animations, right? So I have this. You can name these parts, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to duplicate this. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to make sure it's positioned properly. I'm going to go to the upper torso, I'm going to go to the position property. If you go to C frame or transform C frame position, copy that, go with Control C, and then paste it into the part that we added. That'll make sure it's centered, centered on the body part. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create another part. So we're going to duplicate this. I'm going to call this leather, and call this middle padding, I guess. So and kind of like make it like a metal armor plate sort of a thing. Change the material to metal. And then on the back as well, probably. Okay. And then make this a brighter color. Duplicate it. Make another layer underneath that. And you can use Control and Scale to scale on, to mirror it on the other side as well. Put this down a little further. This one up a little bit. Looks a little bit goofy, but I'm not a design specialist, so it's okay. And I'm also going to add some shoulder pads, but I'll do that on the arms instead. Okay, so there's, I'll call that the upper torso portion. So once you finish metal layer 1, metal layer 2. The names don't matter, I'm just doing that for organizational purposes. But once you finish a specific part, so we finish the upper torso, you want to add another part. So I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to call this armor center. And what you want to make sure, so you can turn off transparency, or you can make it invisible. And what you want to make sure is that essentially we can change the size. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is the position. You want to make sure the position is exactly the same as the body part position. So upper torso, which, because essentially what we'll be doing is we're going to weld all of these parts to this armor center part, and then we're going to weld the armor center to the upper torso. And we're not going to adjust the positioning or anything, we're just going to weld it directly, so that way it'll position it in the exact same position as the upper torso. So when you're designing it, you want to design it with the armor center in the exact same position as the upper torso. So we have all these parts, right? We're going to do model, I believe, will work. Create right here. We're going to do a weld. Okay, let's do, so select leather, armor center, create, weld. Okay, do it the other way around. So select the armor center and then select the part you want to weld. Create, weld. So now do that for each of the parts. So we get that one, and then, oh, backwards. Then we get this one. So now all three of these are welded to the armor center. And remember, that's just a little invisible part that's in the same location as the upper torso. And so now the upper torso portion is complete. And essentially, how the armor system is going to work is it's going to loop through all of the children in the armor model, and it's going to add this to the body part, to the corresponding body part that it's named as, if this exists. So it's not going to necessarily, you don't necessarily have to create models for every single body part, just the ones that you want to include. So if you didn't want to include the upper torso, if you just wanted the armor to be like shoulder pads or something, then you could just include the upper arms and not include any of the other parts. But we're gonna create a new model, and I'm gonna do the same process for the rest of these. Probably just for the upper arms, and that's about it. And I guess the lower torso, I should do that first. So I'm gonna do the lower torso. And I might just speed through the rest of this process because the rest is just gonna be the exact same, but with the different body parts. Okay, so I think I've finished the armor for the most part. There are a couple more things we'll need to do, but as you can see, I have the same sort of setup where each body part that I want to include has the armor center, and it has each of the parts for that body part, and they're all welded to the armor center. So now the next thing we need to do is we're going to want to select all of these different body parts, or all these different armor pieces. We want to select all the different parts, and we want to turn off all of these properties for each of them: can collide, can query, and can touch, and then also turn on maskless. So these three, can collide is just going to make so it's not going to collide with things. Can query will make so that it won't be affected by, it won't be touched by raycasts and things like that. Can touch will make so it won't trigger dot touched, and then maskless is going to make so it doesn't affect the player movement in any way because it won't have actual mass. If you leave this off, then it might kind of make the movement a little weird, especially if you have like really big armor or anything like that with a lot of parts and whatnot. And then with that, that should be a completed armor model. So we can just Control X to cut that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to server storage, create a new folder, rename the folder to armor models, and paste this into that folder. And make sure it's named the same thing as the tool that we'll be using for that. And then we want to add some attributes to this. So, or attributes to this, I think we might already have it, maybe not. So for the armor items, it has the item type armor. We want to add an attribute for armor type, which is essentially going to be helmet, chest plate, or leggings, or whatever, right? I don't remember what the three names were. I don't think that was right. Types, armor, head, chest, and feet. That's going to be the armor type attribute that we're adding here. So add an attribute armor type, and then this is going to be a chest armor. Okay. And then what we want to do, before we get into actually equipping and unequipping, we're going to want to make so the tool actually has the armor model, because right now, if we add this tool into the game, you can see it's just a part. So if you if it's on the ground, you go pick it up, it doesn't really look like armor, and you can drop it, and it doesn't really look like armor. So we're going to move the armor model into the tool as well, just so we can kind of see the armor on the ground. So delete that, go to the sample item. We're going to leave the handle there, I think. What we're going to do is we're going to take the armor model, we're going to copy it, paste it into the tool, and then we want to, let's see, we're going to weld all of the armor centers to this handle part, and we're going to make this handle part invisible. And maybe I'll just do a size of 1 all around. So then we're going to do armor center. Let's see. We're going to go to the weld thing again. So we're going to do handle, armor center, create a weld. And do this for each of the armor centers so that way the armor doesn't fall into pieces. And it'll all just kind of stay stiff when it's dropped on the ground and whatnot. There should be 4, there's only 3. Create. There we go. Okay, so I think they're all welded now. And we're gonna leave this one named handle because then that's what it'll use to actually pick up the tool. This is where the proximity prompt will be added. But then what we also want to do is we want to make these parts have can collide on. And remember, this is just for the tool. This isn't going to be the actual armor model itself when you're wearing it. So the tool's armor model is going to be different from the armor model that's put on your character. The tool's armor model is just so you can configure what it looks like when it's on the ground. So for this one, we are going to turn on can collide. We're going to leave everything else off though. And then we're going to hit play. Except we don't have the chest plate. So we're going to add a chest plate to the workspace. And notice now it has the model. Although one thing I will do first is I'll actually center this. So I want the handle to be in the center of the model, roughly speaking. Otherwise the proximity prompt is going to be kind of positioned wrong. If you know what I mean. It doesn't need to be perfect, but that will make it look a lot better. So that didn't break any of the welds because we're using weld constraints. But that should now, so now if we have this in the workspace, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to update this one because I changed it a little bit. So update the sample item. Always make sure the sample item is because this is what's going to be referenced when you're loading in. So always make sure that those sample items are accurate. But now you can see it looks like a chest plate and we can pick it up. And then we have it in our inventory and we can drop it and it still looks like a chest plate. So now it has the model and it apparently flings around when you click it. But anyway. And also, if you notice, if we turn the dropped items prompt, if we turn this requires line of sight back on, I believe we won't be able to pick this up anymore. Yeah, because now it has parts in the way of the handle. Okay, ignore how it went flying. But now it has parts in the way of the handle, so it detects that it's not in the line of sight, and so it doesn't show the proximity prompt. So you do definitely want this to be off in most cases. Unless the handle is big enough that it'll still show, maybe, I'm not sure. But anyway, so I'm going to leave this off. And now we have our chest plate right there. Now what we're going to do, before we get to the actual coding the armor part, we're going to change the avatar portions, like the sizing and stuff. We're going to go to Home, Game Settings. We're going to go to Avatar. And I'm going to leave mine at R15. You could use R6, but remember if you're doing R6, then your armor model will need to be modeled based on R6. So you could use the same sort of structure here, but make sure the part names reference the R6 part names. So this would just be like left space arm. This would be just torso, because there's not a lower torso and upper torso, there's just a torso. But it should still work with R6. Anyway, so go to Avatar, and then go to the scale. And we're going to change this to just be 100% on everything. And that should make the scaling match that of the dummy, if I'm not mistaken. Or if you have a different scale you'd prefer, you'd want to model the items based on the... Okay, this needs to be 0, not 100. So then the body type, that one's also going to be 0. But then everything else is 100. So get these exact proportions, or you could do different proportions, but you have to make sure you create a dummy with those proportions and model your armor based on that. But for simplicity, I'm just going to do these. And then you can leave these the same. No, you can leave these the same. You could also like change the meshes for the body parts if you want to model the armor based off of a specific sort of body part or a specific sort of body type, specific meshes and stuff. Then you could change these to force those avatar body types, and then you can base the armor off of that. But either way, point is, set your. I'm gonna do it simple like this, just blocky and the same scale. So now when I play, it should change my scaling. So now I'll look all short and blocky, basically, right? And now I should match the scale of the dummy. Yeah, it looks like I do. And now to the armor. So what we're going to do, or not to the armor equipping rather, we're going to go to inventory server, And we're also going to open inventory client because we'll be needing that as well. So we're going to create some functions in an inventory server. So inventory server, I'm going to minimize everything with Control-Shift-E. And I want to put this around the same place where the hotbar equipping is. So we're going to do equipping armor function inventory server armor stack ID. Okay, so then we're going to do, then in this function, where did it go? What happened? Okay, in this function, we're going to do the same thing as in many of the other functions. We're going to do if inventory server dot respawning player, then return end. We don't want them to be able to equip armor while they're dead, because that will most likely cause bugs. And then what we want to do is we want to use this stack ID to find the armor that that stack ID represents. And so we're going to do finding stack local in inventory. So we find the inventory, then we're going to do local stack data. You're going to do inventory server dot find stack data from ID. Player stack ID. Then does that automatically? That does not add the type automatically. It doesn't seem like. So type stack data. So now we find the stack data from that ID. And then if we don't find that, if not stack data, then return end. If we have an invalid ID, we want to just ignore the function call. And then we also want to verify that this stack is actually an armor item. If stack data.item type is not equal to armor, then return end. And then we want to specify character variables. It'll be player.character. If not character, then return end. If the character isn't currently loaded, and we probably don't want to try equipping armor. It's probably going to cause bugs. So we're just going to ignore the function call. And then, but otherwise we'll move on. And then we're going to do the portion that will actually equip to the inventory. So like in the inventory we have the armor table. If we open up the types module, we have this table which is inside of the inventory. So we're going to have one portion that actually equips the armor table and one portion of the code that actually equips the model itself. But this process is going to be pretty much exactly the same as the hotbar, but instead of the slots we're going to have head, chest, and feet, but it's going to be mapped to the stack ID. So we're just going to do equipping to armor data, local armor type, stack data.items1, the attribute, armor type. Remember, that's the new attribute we just added to this armor item. And you want to make sure this is going to be on all the armor items. If you forget it for one armor item, it's going to probably break it. So then if not armor type, then return end. And then we're going to do m.armor, armor type, equals stack ID. And make sure your armor type matches the strings here, because that's what it's going to be using to know which one to equip it to. So we set that to the stack ID for that armor item. And notice here we're just items is a list of all the items, but armor items only stack up to 1, so we're just grabbing the first item from that list and then getting the attribute of that item. And you can use that to get the attribute of really any of the tools. It's kind of just a convenient little shortcut. So then what we're going to do, we're going to have another function. I'm going to do it in a second. Clearing armor. We're going to add another function that'll clear the armor, like the models itself. So I'll create that function. Player armor type. I'm just going to specify head, chest, feet. And with the type definitions, this is essentially just saying this value can be either this, or this, or this. So this little line just means or, essentially. And it's just the, if you hold shift and then press the key under backspace, that's how you get that line. We're going to do this function later though. Okay, and then after that, so after we theoretically clear the armor models that are already there, because essentially before we equip the new armor model, we want to make sure all the current ones are cleared out. So we're going to do equipping model, but before we can really decide how that's going to work, we want to actually figure out the code for equipping the armor model in the first place, so that way we know how we can find the armor model in order to remove it, right? So then we're going to do local tag. We're going to use collection service here. Let me see if I have that already. I do. So if you remember, collection service is very useful. I need to find the function again. So collection service allows you to add tags to instances, and we're going to use that to add tags to this specific player's armor items, and that tag is going to include that player's user ID, and as well as maybe some extra text, just so we can identify and easily get a list of all of the current armor model copies that are being used for that current player. So we're going to do local tag is equal to inventory server of armor tag, so we're going to have to create that. That's a value that we don't have. I'm actually just going to change that into a constant, so local armor tag, and it's going to be %i, %s, equip armor. And so this is a little formatting thing we're going to be doing. Same with it's similar to the save key, how we have the %i. So percentage indicates that we're essentially going to replace this with a variable of some kind, and same with this. The I indicates like an integer, so like a number, and the S indicates a string. So this is going to be replaced with a number, this is going to be replaced with a string. We're going to use this one for the user ID, and then the other one's going to be used for the armor type. And we're just going to have this equipped armor kind of on the end of that, just so we don't get this confused with any other tags or anything, make sure it's unique. So we go down here, that's too far, right here. So it's not going to be inventory server.armor tag, it's just going to be armor tag. So armor tag, and we're going to do :format, which is the same as doing string.format, and we're going to do player.userid. So we're going to replace the %i with player.userid, and we're going to replace the %s with the armor type string that we already have. So that's going to be our tag that we'll add. So we'll do local armor model is equal to server storage dot all armors or dot armor models find first child stack data dot name. And this is why I mentioned that we do want to make sure the armor model has the same name as the tool, because stack data dot name is going to be referencing the name of the tool. So we're going to find the armor model based on the name, and we also want to make sure all of our items have unique names. So that's going to find our armor model, in theory, if it exists. So we're going to do if armor model, then cloning local clone equals armor model clone cs add tag. We're going to add that tag that we mentioned, except I think we can just do it like this: clone add tag tag. Either way, it does the same thing. So we're going to add the tag to the clone, and the clone is just going to be clone of the armor model. So we're going to take that clone, we're going to do clone.parent equals character, and then we also need to weld each individual part to make sure it actually stays in place. So welding, we're going to do for I comma part model in clone to children do. So remember, in our armor model we have a model with a bunch of models inside of it. So each of the children is going to be another model. So then we're going to do local body part is equal to char find first child model dot name. So this is why I mentioned you want to have the same name as the body part you want the model to attach to. It's going to be a base part. So then do body part, or if body part, then do else warn. Use the fancy format string thing. So the body part for the armor model clone.name as body part model has model.name, but no body part is found by that name. So this is going to be a simple little error message. So in case you have a typo or something, this will help you find that typo and make sure you know what's going wrong or anything. Anyway, so then if it finds that body part by the name, so if there is a lower torso in your character, which there should be if you typed it correctly, then we'll do local weld equals instance.new, create a regular weld.parent, do that. Yeah, so weld.parent, body part, weld.part0 is equal to body part as well, and then weld.part1 is equal to part model.primary part. So this is somewhere else we're going to have to change, I think, as well. So what we're doing here is we're creating a new weld, and we're putting it inside of the body part, so that's going to be like inside the lower torso, and then we're setting it to weld the body part to the primary part of the model, and that primary part is what we're going to have to set. So that's going to be the armor center, but we need to actually manually set primary part to the armor center. So set the primary part of each of these models to the armor center model, or to the armor center part. So that this will then reference the armor center. Alternatively, you could just do .armor center, but I'm just going to do .primary part, so you can name the armor center whatever you want to. But it doesn't really matter, as long as it references the right thing. So this is going to create a weld, and it's going to weld those two parts together, and it's going to put them in the exact same location, and it's going to like force them to stay in the same location. So this will effectively add the model to the character, and it'll add the tag to that model as well, so we can easily reference that, we're going to easily find all the models for that particular player, and then destroy them in our clearing armor function. So we're going to do that next. So let's see. So clearing armor, we're going to go down here, local tag equals inventory server, or no, we'll just do armor tag, format player.userid, armor type, and then we're going to do for I, object, and cs get tagged, for that tag, do object destroy. So it's pretty simple. We just find everything with that tag and we just destroy it. And so that'll clear all the armor, so we can place that up here. So inventory server dot clear armor. And this should be the completed equip armor function. But we're also going to want to do an unequip armor function. So I'm going to go down here, unequipping armor function inventory server player, and I'm going to do stack ID if inventory server dot respawning player, then return end. So what we want to do here is we want to, let's see, we want to find the inventory, so local env types.inventory equals inventory server dot all inventories player, okay, and then we're going to loop through the armor table, through the armor data. So we're going to loop through this, right, for that specific player. So for armor type string, I guess I don't think I have to specify that. For armor type other stack ID in m.armor do if stack ID equals other stack ID, then, so we're going to loop through these three items, and we're going to see if any of them match this stack ID, and if they do, we're just going to do m.armor, armor type equals nil, and remember this armor type is coming from here. Since we're looping through each of these, we know what these are during each iteration, so we can just use that to unequip that specific armor type, and then we can clear the armor. I'm just going to type it right here, so I want to do inventory server player armor type. And we could do a break here, but that doesn't really matter because it's only 3 items. But yeah, and we only want to run the clear armor function when we're inside this loop and when this if statement runs as true, because if this if statement never runs as true, then that means we're trying to unequip armor that isn't equipped, and so we don't want to clear the armor and like destroy all the models for the wrong armor thing, right? And we also need the armor type as an argument as well. So then we're going to do updating. And we need to do this in the other one as well, I forgot. So in the equip armor, at the very end of this, updating. Yeah, so we're going to do updating, we're going to do signal.fire client player inventory client, and then what was the, I think it's just update display. And it's just update. Okay, so inventory client update. So it's pretty much the same thing as what we've been doing. We're going to specify the inventory. And then one thing we will do is we're going to return true. And essentially we're going to say, I'm going to add that as boolean right here. So there's a bunch of different ways where the armor equipping could just not work, because it has all these return statements that could happen. And so in that case, we want to differentiate between these return statements and between when the armor does successfully equip, so that way when it doesn't, we can send a little message that says the armor didn't successfully equip, or something like that, right? So we're going to return true at the very end, because this is going to indicate that the armor is successfully equipped, and we can move on and not display the error. But if it's not true, then we're going to display an error. Then for unequip armor, we can just do signal.fire client player inventory client update inventory. But in this case, we don't need to return a success boolean, because it doesn't really matter too much in this case. There's not really a lot of cases where this will fail, except for when you're respawning, I guess. But I mean, that's, you know, pretty obvious. So now we're going to go, so I believe all of these three functions are fully functional, pun not intended. And then now we're going to set up the client side to actually use those functions when you press the equip button. So then we're going to go to inventory client. Actually, before we do that, we need to add signal fires. Forgot about that. So you connect the signal events. So signal, listen, remote, inventory, server, equip armor, and signal, unequip armor, cool. So now we should be able to call these from the client, and we're going to use invoke for this one so we can get the return value. And then as for where we want to use them, so we're going to go to the equip button pressed function, or the unequip button function. So remember, we have this setup armor equipping thing. So that's what we're going to do right now. Okay. So we're going to do temp janitor clean, because essentially when we're equipping to the hotbar, we need to do all this fancy stuff with determining which hotbar slot to equip to. But with the armor, we can just look at the armor type. So we're just going to clean the chores. We're going to get rid of, you know, we're going to reset the instruction tag to make it invisible again. So temp janitor clean, and then equipping to armor slot. Local success equals signal.invoke server inventory server equip armor stack data.stack ID. That's not success. Then inventory server or inventory client, yeah. Inventory client dot error message. In order to do something went wrong while equipping armor. And we're going to return. So this should run that function, and then it should check if it worked or not. And then if it didn't, we're going to display the error message. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And then the other thing we're going to want to do is, if we're down here in the unequip, now we need to set up this part as well. So signal.fire server inventory server unequip armor inventory.stack selected stack ID inventory client, sorry about that, client.selected stack ID. And I also realized one thing I forgot on this upper portion. Actually, no. So this needs to be an invoke server rather than a fire server. I didn't forget it, but it didn't specify it. So this needs to be invoked so we can actually get that return value. But this one down here can be fire server because we don't need the return value. And so this will unequip the armor, that one will equip the armor. And I believe that should be everything for the armor. Well, not quite everything. There's one more thing we're going to add, but okay, armor equipping not set up yet. That's inventory server. Okay, so I need to okay. So what's going on here is that there's another portion where we need to run the function in inventory server, and that is the automatic equipping portion. So we're going to do in this part inventory server dot equip armor. We're going to do we're going to do player stack ID, and that should be it for this. And this is in the register item function. This is where it'll automatically equip things to the hotbar, and this is just so you can automatically equip armor as well. So if you pick up a piece of armor, it'll just automatically equip it. If you don't have anything equipped already, that is. So we're gonna actually specify that, I think. So yeah, we're gonna actually check if there's something equipped there first. So local armor type equals stack.items one get attribute armor type if inv.armor type equals nil, then we're gonna equip. So essentially we find the armor type for that specific armor item, and if we don't have anything equipped to that armor type, then we're gonna equip this. But if we do, then we won't automatically equip because we don't want to just change the player's armor or anything, right? We want to make sure that they do it themselves, right? Alternatively, you could just remove this whole portion if you don't want armor to automatically equip. But nonetheless, also, this is another thing we need to do, because our code does handle this. I'm just going to leave this here because I think this shouldn't even run anymore. Or maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think this is ever going to run, because essentially when we actually pick up an item using the proximity prompts, we just simply don't pick it up if they have the max items. So the only way that this could run is if the player somehow gets items without picking them up. And I don't think that would ever really happen unless you gave the items to the player through a script, in which case you just want to make sure that the script manually detects if they have max items using the function created for that, which is right wherever it was. Check inventory full. So you'd want to manually check that before adding the items. So we'll leave this here just so that way it's just, if it does ever happen, then know that there probably is an issue in your code and you probably need to change something. So yeah, I'm just going to leave this as is. But anyway, so the armor equipping and unequipping should be working now though. So let's test that. So I don't have any armor items. Actually I do, but they're not equipped. I should be able to equip them. Okay, it gives me an error. Set to index nil. So the player is nil in somewhere. Inventory client, that's line 178. I use Control G to go to the line, by the way. And then so success, invoke server. Okay, so that goes to the signal, index nil, user ID. So that's going to be in here. Right, so this top one's the one we want to look at, because this is what's running afterwards. So this is line 519 of inventory server. Player.useID, player is nil. That is because, why is that? That is because we didn't specify it. So let's do player armor type. This is an equipped armor. I just forgot to provide the arguments there. So that should fix that. So now if we go, okay, now it shows it's equipped already. So I think there's another thing we need to add because it looks like there's another little bug there. But if you unequip it and re-equip it, it kind of works. Right, there's one thing I forgot about. So in addition to making sure the armor center is in the right position, you also need to make sure it's in the right orientation, which I did not do. So in order to fix this, I'm going to cut this from the armor models. I'm going to paste it back in the dummy, and I'm just going to kind of slide it down. Actually, What's the best way to position this? Why is that? So we're going to position this roughly how it was. Okay, so that's roughly right. It's close enough for me. We can leave this as is. The tool itself, the model's working fine. But for the armor model itself, we want to make sure these armor centers are rotated the right way. So I'm going to go to the body part in question. I'm going to copy the position. So this is the left upper arm. Copy the position. And then I'm going to copy the rotation as well, the orientation right here. And that was what I forgot to do. So that'll rotate it. And then you want to do that for each of these. So for the lower torso, copy the position of that. And copy the rotation. Okay, so these two are done. I'm going to minimize those, keep track of it. Right upper arm. Copy the position. Copy the rotation. And then the upper torso. So now this model should be set up correctly. I'm still not sure why the pivot's way up here. Maybe I bumped that, I don't know. But anyway, so that's fixed now. Anyway, so we're going to cut that, we're going to paste it back into the armor models. And in theory, now that should be set up correctly. So now, it'll try and automatically equip, but there's still that little bug we need to fix. But if you unequip and reequip it, it looks better. However, the shoulder pads are very wonky. That's the only thing that seems to not be working. So let's see if we can figure out why that is. Everything else seems like it's working fine now though. So let's see. So chest plates. So I'm wondering if what's going on here is we have the left upper arm, shoulder pad, shoulder pad. So these are backwards. That's exactly what's going on. Okay. So if we just do a little flipperoo, I'm going to delete all these welds because I don't know which one's which. I'm just going to redo them. Okay, so now all those are right. So weld, 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 and then do the same thing here. Weld, weld, weld. Now that should be correct. Paste that back into the armor models. Run it again. Unequip, reequip. There we go. So now it equips properly. It's a little bit offset, I think, because it shows through, but I'm too lazy to fix that right now. But anyway, so it equips fine, and it seems like it works. But as you may have noticed, if we leave the game while it's equipped, and then we join again, it stays equipped, but it doesn't actually add the armor model. Okay, yeah, so the issue here, we go to inventory server, it's when we're loading the data. So go down to the load data function right here. So what's going on here, so we're creating the new stacks, and in order for loading the armor and the hotbar, all it does is it just copies over the tables. We also want to actually add the armor models, because what it's not doing, so it's equipping the armor, it's just not adding the model whenever we load the data. So we might have to do that manually down here. Where's the best place for this? I'll just put it right down here. Adding armor model. So then we're going to do for armor type stack ID in dot armor do. So we're going to loop through the armor, and we're going to say inventory server dot equip armor player stack ID, and that should fix our issue, I think. Yep. So now what it does is it loops through all the armor items that are equipped, and then it actually equips them. And then another thing we're missing here is that it doesn't actually display the equipped items. So we're going to want to do that as well. But it seems like everything else works fine. And if we drop it, it doesn't unequip it, so we're going to want to fix that. So dropping it would unregister the item. So we're just going to do that. We're going to go over to the unregister function. So then right here, to do unequip armor, inventory server dot unequip armor player data dot stack ID. That should fix that bug. So now equip the armor, we have it equipped, drop it, it unequips it, gets rid of the model. And you can see when we pick it up, it automatically equips it again, and so on. So that seems like it works fine now. So I'm just going to search for any more to-dos, and then if there's no more, I'm going to move on to the display. So let's see, did I write anything else? That one's fine. I'm going to change this warning message. This is line 357 of inventory server, the register item function. So I'm going to change this to items were added to inventory even though it's full. They won't be displayed in the GUI. Okay, so then I'm going to go down here. This is, where is this? Update dropped items. To do check max items. I think I just forgot to get rid of that. Check max items, because we already did that. So then there's no more to-dos that I wrote. Cool. By the way, this find replace all, if you go to view, you can find it right here. Okay, so that should be all the little bugs with the armor equipping fixed. So now what we want to do is actually display the armor. So we're going to go to inventory client for that. And we're going to go to update display. And hopefully this should be relatively quick, since this video is getting a little bit long. Update display. Updating hotbar. Updating armor. For armor type. String in. We're going to do helmet. We're going to do chest. Or yeah, head, chest, boots, or feet, rather. So we're going to create a new table with these 3 strings in it, and we're going to loop through that table to essentially loop through all the different armor types for each one. Finding slot data, local slot F. It's going to be, let's see, let's look at the GUI for reference. Inventory, armor, inner. So each of these slots is going to be a text button, and that text button is going to have an image on it. Okay, so slot F is going to be actually a text button. Let's see, equals armor slots. We're going to create a new table up here. So we have a hotbar slots, we're going to do local armor slots. I'm going to move this down here actually. So armor slots equals an empty table. I'm going to do head equals armor inner dot head, and then chest equals armor inner dot chest. Feet equals armor inner dot feet. Cool. So that's gonna be our armor slots. So then back in our update display. And what we're going to do, so we're going to find the We're going to find the slot by referencing that table, so armor slots, armor type. I'm going to do local stack ID number is equal to inventory client dot inv data dot armor type. So that's how we're going to reference the current armor that's equipped to that slot, to the current slot that we're looping through, which could be nil. So I'm going to specify that right here. I'm going to change this, put a question mark right there. So we'll have the stack ID and then local stack data. Stack data is equal to, I'm just going to do inventory client dot find stack data from ID, stack ID, and then what we're going to do, so we're going to say updating display if stack data is equal to nil. So if there is nothing equipped to that armor slot, then what we want to do is we want to do slot f dot image equals an empty string. And else, okay, wait, this is going to be a little bit different. So slot f dot image. So this is slot f dot image, which is a property. So we want to get the image property of the image item right there. So image is going to an empty string. Slot f dot image equal to stack data dot image. Is that? Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So that should be all we need for updating the armor, or for the display. And now, yeah, you can see it shows the image there. And if we unequip it, it gets rid of the image. Cool. Seems like it works fine. And remember, you can always add different types of armor. So you could create a helmet and just name the inner model head to like have it added to the head. You can create, you know, pants and other different things. You could even just create gloves. But right now my armor system is limited to just head, chest, and feet. If you wanted to add like gloves as well as the chest, like in two separate armor items, you might need to change how this armor system is structured a little bit. You might need to add more armor types, but the overall structure would be pretty much exactly the same, just with more armor type options. So then the one very last thing I'm going to do, even though this episode is getting long, this will end up being the final episode, I believe, unless there's other bugs and stuff I need to fix. But just so I can finish this now and not have to make another episode, I'm going to set up basic functionality for actually having the armor do something. And bear with me here, this time I'm not actually referencing old code, I'm actually coding this from scratch, so I may make some mistakes. However, it should be relatively simple. So in the inventory server, we have the equip armor and the unequip armor functions, right? So whenever these run, that's when armor is going to be equipped or unequipped. So what we want to do is we're going to create a new function, updating armor stats, function inventory server, specify the player, print armor changed. So inventory server.update armor stats. So we're going to call this from both of these two functions, and that'll print whenever the armor is changed in any way. So as you can see, we just joined and it said armor changed because it loaded the armor on our character, right? If we unequip it, armor changed, armor changed, armor changed. So anytime you equip or unequip something, it's going to run the armor changed function, or the that's not what the function is called. It's going to run the update armor stats function. And so then what you can do with that, which makes adding like, you know, health bonuses and stuff to armor really easy, you can go to the tool, so go to all items, go to the tool, the chest plate. You can add an attribute. So I'm just going to add health buff. I'm going to put this as a number and say I want it to have a health buff of 50. So it gives you 50 extra health. So now all I have to do is I want to loop through all the currently equipped armors. So looping through armor and summing buffs. So local health buff equals 0. You could add other buffs too if you wanted to, and you can do these in the same way. You can do local, or for armor type, armor. We also want to do the inventory, so types.inventory equals inventory server.all inventories player. Health buff, it's going to be a number, pretty obviously. So armor type, so for every armor type string and stack ID number in armor do. So we're going to loop through all the armor, and we're going to say if stack ID equals nil, then continue end. We want to ignore any armor slots that are empty, but then if they're not empty, we want to say if armor type, or if, yeah, so we're going to find the local stack data, types.stack data, go to inventory server find stack data from ID, stack ID. If not stack data, then continue end. Finding armor stack, checking, adding buff. So then if we find the stack data for that specific armor that we're seeing is that that armor is equipped, so we find the stack data for that armor, and then we want to see if that armor has certain buffs. So we're going to do if stack data dot items 1 get attribute health buff is not equal to nil. Then we're going to do, here, actually I'm going to change this to local health buff. Let's go to this. So if health buff is not equal to nil, then health buff, total health buff. Total health buff equals health buff, or plus equals health buff. So we're going to add the armor's health buff to the total health buff. So the armor is going to be 50, and so then the total is going to go from 0 to 50. But if you add multiple armor items, it'll sum them up essentially and add them together. And you could do this for other stats too. So if you wanted to define like maybe stamina buff or mana buff or whatever else you wanted to add for armor attributes and stuff, and you could do that as just separate variables but done in the same way. So then after we determine the total health buff, applying buffs, so we may want you may want to keep in mind what the default's going to be, like what the core is going to be. So by default you're going to have 100 health, right? For me, I'm just going to type the numbers in directly, but you may want to store these numbers elsewhere. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do local character equals player.character. If not character, then return end. Local humanoid. If not humanoid, then return end. So we're going to find the humanoid, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say humanoid.max health equals, I guess what we're going to do first. So I'm going to change this to be character variables. I'm going to do adding buffs, local current health percentage equals hum.health divided by hum.max health. So then hum.max health equals 100 is going to be the base value plus total health buff. And then we're going to do hum.health equals hum.max health times current health percentage. So what we're doing here is essentially we're going to increase the max health. So in this case we'll have a 50 health buff, so it's going to do from 100 to 150. But say you're like currently at 80 out of 100 health, and then you equip this armor, it's going to essentially almost damage you because it's going to give you more max health, but it's not going to increase your health, so your health percentage is going to go down. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep track of the health percentage before adding the hacks, before upping the max health, and then after upping the max health, we're going to essentially maintain that same health percentage, but with the new amount of health. Alternatively, you could just not do this, and you could just make so they have to regen it, but you know, it's kind of optional. Or you could even fully give them a health, fully recover their health, but that's probably not a good idea because then they could probably exploit that. Anyway, but this should add a basic health buff. So now, if we look at our model, look at our humanoid, look at the properties, we have the max health and we have the health. If I equip this armor, did it update it? It did not update it. Let's see. So print updated armor, print total health buff, print increased health. So let's see if we can figure out where this is not working. So it updated the armor, 0. So total health buff is 0. So it's not calculating the health buff correctly. It's maintaining it at 0. This should be 50. So total health buff starts at 0. So we can get rid of these other prints because we know that those work fine. We're going to say, let's see, print armor type stack ID, then stack data. Is this a typo at all? Health buff, looks the same. We're going to say print adding health. Print health buff. So let's see where that's stopping. So update armor chest 42. Where's the number 42 coming from? So, oh, that's the stack ID, okay. So the armor type, the stack ID, and it doesn't find the stack data, so that's the issue. So find stack data. Okay, so this, we need to specify player. That's what I forgot. Okay, now it looks like it's working. So the humanoid, we can see that now we have the max health increased, and we can see that it updates based on whether or not we have it equipped. And notice that if we go over here, we damage ourselves a little bit from the server side. Ah, I've been wounded in battle. Okay, I'm slowly healing. If I equip it, it'll match the percentage, but it'll increase the actual amount of health, if that makes sense. But yeah, so that's about how it works. That will be the end of this series. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I hope you enjoyed. If you have any suggestions for videos that you would like me to make in the future, or even extensions of this series, then feel free to let me know in the comments, or probably preferably in the Discord server. I may be more likely to see the suggestion in that case. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this series. If you would like access to the completed files, which I'll upload the new ones for this series now, then you can purchase the $299 a month membership for either on YouTube or Patreon. If you're interested in one-on-one tutoring with me, you can purchase the higher membership levels, and we can work on whatever you want to work on and learn whatever you want to learn. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.